Hello and welcome. You're welcome to comment your city and the time below. I always enjoy reading them. If you find these stories interesting, please consider subscribing. Let's start tonight's story. I took the job at the High Wind Plains Wind Farm 3 weeks after my life fell apart in a courtroom. The judge ordered me to pay $18,000 to a man whose jaw I broke in a parking lot outside a bar I shouldn't have been drinking at. My security license was suspended pending review, a polite way of saying revoked. I had $700 in checking and a truck with a cracked windshield that drank oil like water. So when my cousin's friend mentioned a night security gig at a remote wind farm that didn't ask many questions, I filled out the application with a license number I copied from an old coworker's personnel file. 2 days later, I got a text with an address and a start date. No interview, no background check, or at least not one that worked. The drive took 4 hours through high plains that looked like God had smoothed them flat with the palm of his hand. The turbines appeared on the horizon long before I reached them, white towers rising out of golden grassland like the fingers of something buried trying to claw its way up. There were 37 of them arranged in loose rows, their blades turning slow and silent in the late afternoon wind. The operations building sat at the center of the site, a prefab structure with metal siding and narrow windows. A gravel service road looped through the turbine rows in a rough figure eight marked with reflective mile markers every quarter mile. To the west was a chain-link fence surrounding the substation, a humming cluster of transformers and breaker boxes that made my teeth ache when I stood too close. And beyond that, half hidden by a rise in the land, was a cluster of trailers left over from the construction phase. 4 of them, windows dark, doors hanging open. I parked next to a dusty Ford Ranger and walked into the ops building. Inside was a break room with a coffee maker, a bathroom that smelled like industrial cleaner, and a control room dominated by a wall of CCTV, monitors showing various angles of turbines, road, and empty grassland. A man in his 50s sat at the desk, his face leathered by sun and cigarettes. He didn't look up when I entered. "You Mercer?" he asked. "Caleb Mercer, yeah." "Doyle." He still didn't look at me. "You're 15 minutes early, that's good. Means you're either eager or desperate." He opened a drawer and pulled out a manila folder. "Corporate sent over your orientation packet. Standard procedures, radio codes, emergency contacts. Read it tonight, sign the last page, leave it in the desk." He slid the folder across. I opened it. Neat typed pages on company letterhead. Wind farm night security procedures, lots of bullet points and subsections, professional, boring. Then Doyle reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper, edges worn soft. He placed it on top of the folder and leaned back in his chair, finally looking at me. His eyes were the color of dishwater. "Use these," he said quietly. "The packet is for insurance." I unfolded the paper. Handwritten in blue ink, the letters cramped and uneven. Rules for night shift. 1. If you see a person inside the fence line after midnight, do not challenge them. If they stop moving, you already lost. 2. If the red beacons blink in a wave pattern, west to east, stay in the ops building until dawn. Do not look out the windows. 3. The substation hums, that's normal. If it stops humming, leave the site immediately and do not return until someone calls you. 4. The trailers are off limits. They look abandoned. They aren't. 5. If you hear your name called from outside, check the CCTV before responding. If you see yourself on camera, do not answer. I read them twice. Then I looked at Doyle. "This some kind of hazing thing?" "No." "Then what? Just use them." He stood and grabbed a jacket from the back of his chair. "I'm day shift now, you're solo nights, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Radio works most of the time. Nearest town is 40 minutes. You'll do a patrol every 2 hours. Vehicle check of the perimeter road, visual on all turbines, log anything unusual. Rest of the time you sit here and watch the screens. Questions? I had about 100, but his tone made it clear he wouldn't answer any of them. No. Good. He walked to the door, then paused. Don't use the corporate rules, Mercer. They'll get you killed. He left. I sat down at the desk and looked at the 2 sets of rules. The corporate packet said to challenge anyone on site after hours. Doyle's handwritten list said never to challenge anyone after midnight. The corporate packet said to report beacon malfunctions and continue patrol. Doyle's list said to lock myself inside if the beacons blinked in sequence. They contradicted each other completely, and both were written like my life depended on them. I should have walked out then, driven back to town, found a different job, dealt with my debts some other way. But I didn't, because when I looked at Doyle's handwritten rules, something in my chest went cold and certain, like a key turning in a lock I didn't know was there. I had been here before. Not this building, not this job. But somewhere on this site, at some point in my childhood, I had stood in the shadow of these turbines and felt this same specific dread. I couldn't remember when or why. The memory was a gap, a hole in my timeline shaped like wind and white towers. I folded Doyle's rules and put them in my pocket. Then I opened the corporate packet and started reading. At 6:47 p.m., the sun dropped below the horizon and the turbine beacons ignited. Red lights blinking in slow, staggered rhythm across the rows. The wind picked up, the cameras flickered, and I realized that the CCTV monitor showing the north side of the ops building had just captured me walking past the window while sitting inside. The figure on the screen moved exactly like me. Same stride, same slight limp in my left leg from an old knee injury. It walked past the window, paused, and turned its head toward the camera. For 3 seconds, it stared directly into the lens. Then it continued walking out of frame. I stood up fast enough that the chair tipped over. I went to the window and looked out. Empty gravel. No footprints in the dust. The timestamp on the monitor read 6:49 p.m. Current time. I checked the playback. The figure was there, clear as anything. I pulled Doyle's rules from my pocket and read them again. Number 5. If you see yourself on camera, do not answer. Answer what? Outside, the turbines turned in perfect silence, their blades carving the sky into pieces. The wind direction indicator on the control panel read calm, 0 knots. But the turbines kept turning anyway. I sat back down. I opened a notebook I'd brought from home and wrote the date, the time, and a single sentence. I saw myself on camera. I was inside. Corporate rules say report anomalies. Doyle's rules say don't answer. I don't know what that means. I set the pen down. When I looked back at the page, there was a second sentence below mine in handwriting that wasn't mine. You will. I stared at the notebook for a full minute, waiting for the words to make sense or disappear. They did neither. The ink was black, slightly smudged, written in a loose cursive I'd never used. The sentence sat there like something I'd forgotten I'd written, except I knew I hadn't. I flipped back through the pages. Empty. I flipped forward. Nothing. Just that one line. You will. I closed the notebook and shoved it into the desk drawer. Then I made coffee I didn't want and stared at the CCTV wall, trying to construct a rational explanation. Stress. Exhaustion. Maybe I'd written the line earlier and forgotten. Maybe the light was playing tricks. But I didn't believe that. Not. Really? At 8 p.m., I did my first patrol. I took the company truck, a white F-150 with the High Wind logo on the door, and followed the service road through the turbine rows. The headlights carved tunnels through the dark. The turbines loomed overhead, their nacelles the size of school buses perched on towers that vanished into the black sky. The red beacons blinked slow and steady, each turbine slightly out of sync with the others. I stopped at mile marker 3 and rolled down the window. The wind had died completely. The grassland stretched silent and still under a sky with too many stars. I could hear the turbines, though. Not the blades, but a low hum from deep inside the towers, like the resonance of a tuning fork pressed to bone. I keyed the radio. Unit 1 to base. Patrol checkpoint 3, all clear. Static. Then my own voice, faint and distorted. All clear, don't look up. I dropped the radio. It clattered onto the passenger seat, still hissing. Static. I hadn't said that. The voice was mine, but I hadn't said it. I looked up anyway. The turbine directly above me had stopped. Blades frozen mid-rotation, perfectly still. The red beacon continued blinking, but the blades didn't move even though every other turbine in the row was still turning. I put the truck in gear and drove back to the ops building faster than I should have. When I got inside, I checked the CCTV feed for turbine 12. On camera, it was turning. Blades in smooth rotation, no interruption. I watched the feed for 5 minutes. Normal. I went back outside and looked at turbine 12 with my own eyes. The blades were frozen. I checked the camera again, turning. I stepped outside, frozen. The discrepancy was absolute. The camera showed one reality. My eyes showed another, and neither was lying. I went back inside, locked the door, and pulled out Doyle's rules. Number 2, if the red beacons blink in a wave pattern, west to east, stay in the ops building until dawn. I watched the monitors. The beacons were still staggered, not sequential. Not a wave, not yet. At 10:30 p.m., I tried calling Doyle. No answer. I tried the emergency contact number from the corporate packet. It rang 14 times and disconnected. At 11:45 p.m., I opened the desk drawer to check the notebook again. The page now had 3 lines. I saw myself on camera. I was inside. Corporate rules say report anomalies. Doyle's rules say don't answer. I don't know what that means. You will. It's starting earlier tonight. You brought something with you. I hadn't written the 3rd line. I was sure of that. I'd been watching the cameras, drinking coffee, pacing the room. The notebook had been in the drawer the whole time. I grabbed a pen and wrote directly below, "Who are you?" I waited. Nothing happened. I felt like an idiot. Then I looked at the CCTV monitor showing the interior of the ops building. The camera mounted in the corner above the door. On screen, I was sitting at the desk. Normal. But the me on camera was writing in the notebook. I wasn't writing. I was watching the screen. The me on camera finished writing, set the pen down, and looked directly into the camera, not at the lens, at me, through the screen. It smiled. I spun around. The room was empty. Just me. I looked back at the monitor. The figure at the desk had returned to a neutral posture, hands folded, staring at the CCTV wall like I had been doing. I checked the notebook. New line. You did. The version of you that lied on the application. The version that broke a man's face and ran. The version that came back. My throat closed. I forced air through. The corporate rules said nothing about this. Doyle's rules didn't cover it either. This was something else. Something neither set of instructions had anticipated. Or maybe something they both knew about and refused to name. At 11:58 p.m., the red beacons began to blink in sequence. It started at the westernmost turbine and rippled east across the rows, one beacon igniting after another in a perfect wave. Slow, deliberate, like a pulse moving through the body of something vast. I watched it sweep across the site, turbine by turbine, until it reached the eastern edge and stopped. Then it reversed, east to west. The wave rolled back, Doyle's rule was clear. Stay in the ops building until dawn. Do not look out the windows. I killed the lights. I sat in the dark with only the glow of the monitors. The red wave pulsed again, west to east, east to west, rhythmic, patient. Then I heard it. Footsteps, gravel crunching outside, slow, even steps approaching the building. I checked the CCTV feed for the entrance. Empty, no one there. The footsteps stopped directly outside the door. A knock, one knock per second, perfectly timed. I didn't move, didn't breathe. The corporate rules said to challenge anyone on site. Doyle's rules said never challenge anyone after midnight. The knocking continued, 20 knocks, 30, 50. Then a voice. My voice. "Let me in, Caleb. I finished the patrol. It's cold out here." I looked at the monitor. The porch was empty. "I have the report," the voice continued. "Everything's clear. Just open the door." I checked the notebook. New line. Don't. The knocking stopped. The footsteps moved away, circling the building. I watched the monitors, tracking the sound. It passed the north side, the west side, the south. Then it stopped at the window behind me. I didn't turn around. I kept my eyes on the monitors. Tap, 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 knuckles on glass. "I can see you, Caleb. I'm looking right at you." On the monitor showing the exterior south window, there was nothing. Just my reflection in the glass from the monitor glow. Except the reflection was smiling, and I wasn't. The tapping stopped. The red wave pulsed, west to east, east to west. And somewhere far out in the turbine rows, I heard a sound like metal tearing. I stayed in the dark until the sun came up. When dawn broke, the red beacons extinguished and the turbines returned to their normal staggered rhythm. The sky went pale gray, then blue. I unlocked the door and stepped outside. The gravel showed no footprints. The window had no marks. The air smelled like dust and ozone. I should have quit. I should have gotten in my truck and driven until the turbines disappeared behind me. But I didn't. Because quitting meant going back to the lawsuit, the debt, the apartment I'd already been evicted from. And because some part of me, the part that recognized this place from a childhood memory I couldn't access, needed to understand what was happening. Doyle arrived at 6:50 a.m., parking his Ranger next to my truck. He walked into the ops building carrying a thermos and a folded newspaper, acting like this was the most ordinary morning in the world. He glanced at me, noted the circles under my eyes, and poured himself coffee. "You used my rules," he said, not a question. "Yeah? Good." He sat down at the desk and opened the log. I'd filled it out mechanically during the last hour of my shift. Patrol times, weather conditions, no incidents, all lies. He read it, nodded, and signed his name at the bottom as day shift supervisor. "Doyle," I said. "What the fuck is this place?" He looked at me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "You saw it." "I saw myself on camera. I heard myself outside, the turbines." "I know." He sipped his coffee. "Everyone sees it. First night, second night, doesn't matter. The site shows you." "Shows me what?" "That there's two of everything here. Two roads, two rule sets, two shifts, two versions of the same night trying to happen at once." He set the mug down. "You picked the right rules. That's why you're still here." I wanted to grab him, shake him, make him explain, in language that didn't sound like a ghost story. But something in his tone stopped me. He wasn't being cryptic for effect. He was being careful, like a man describing a live mine. "Why didn't you tell me this during orientation?" I asked. "Because if I had, you wouldn't have believed me. You'd have thought I was fucking with you and you'd have used the corporate rules out of spite or logic, and then you'd be gone." He opened the newspaper. "This way you had a chance." "A chance at what?" "Surviving long enough to matter." I wanted to ask what that meant, but a vehicle pulled into the lot, a white van with a contractor logo on the side. A woman in her 30s climbed out wearing work boots and a high-visibility vest. She had dark hair pulled into a ponytail and the kind of face that looked friendly until you noticed her eyes didn't smile. She walked in without knocking. "Morning," she said brightly, pulling a clipboard from under her arm. "Mara Tseng, turbine maintenance. I'm here for the nacelle inspection on units 4, 7, and 12. Doyle's face went carefully blank. "You're not on the schedule." "I am." She handed him a printed work order. "Dispatch sent it over yesterday. Should be in your system." Doyle scanned the paper, then opened the computer and clicked through screens. His jaw tightened. "You're right, it's here." Mara smiled. "Always am." Then she turned to me and handed me a second work order. Same contractor logo, same date. But the name at the top read Mara Voss, and the turbine numbers were different. Units 9, 18, and 23. "You're also in the system," she said, still smiling. "Funny how that works." I looked at Doyle. He was staring at her with something close to fear. "Which one's real?" I asked. "Both," Mara said. "Depends on which schedule you check. Depends on which version of the morning you're in." She tucked the clipboard under her arm. "Don't worry, I'm used to it. This site does that, doubles things, splits them. You get used to reading between the lines." Doyle stood abruptly. "You need to leave." "I have work to do. Not here, not today." Mara's smile didn't falter, but something cold flickered in her eyes. "You don't get to decide that, Doyle. Your day shift. You watch the cameras and drink coffee and pretend the night doesn't happen, but it does. And it's getting worse." She looked at me. "You felt it last night, didn't you? The way the air gets heavy before the red wave starts. The way the turbines hum even when they're stopped." I didn't answer, but my silence was answer enough. She nodded. "That's the overlap. Two versions of the site trying to occupy the same space. It's been happening for 3 years, ever since they built the substation on top of the old grid. You're standing on a seam, Caleb. A place. Where things don't line up right." Doyle stepped between us. "Get out." Mara met his eyes. For a moment I thought she'd argue. Then she shrugged. "Fine. But you should tell him the real rules, Doyle. Not the ones you wrote, the ones you've been following." She turned and walked out, climbed into her van and drove toward the turbine rows. I looked at Doyle. What did she mean? He didn't answer. He sat back down, opened the log, and started filling out the day shift report like I wasn't there. "Doyle. Go home, Mercer, sleep. Come back tonight and follow the rules I gave you. That's all you need to do." "What rules are you following?" His pen stopped. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw something like guilt in his face. "The ones that keep me alive," he said quietly. "Even if they don't keep you safe." I left. I drove back to the motel where I was staying, lay down on a bed that smelled like cigarettes and mildew, and tried to sleep. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw my reflection in the CCTV monitor smiling. At 6 p.m., I drove back to the site. Mara's van was still parked near Turbine 12. The sun was setting. The red beacons began to ignite. Doyle was waiting in the ops building. He handed me a new piece of paper, different from the first. Handwritten, but in different ink. Darker, more frantic. "Updated rules for tonight. 1. If Mara Tseng asks you to follow her, say no. 2. If Mara Voss asks you to follow her, say yes. 3. If you can't tell which one she is, stay in the truck." I looked at him. What the hell does this mean? "It means," Doyle said, "that she's in both versions and only one of them wants you to survive." He left. The red wave started at 9:47 p.m. The red beacons rolled west to east in a smooth, unbroken wave, each turbine igniting in sequence like a fuse burning toward detonation. I was in the ops building, lights off, door locked, following Doyle's rule. The monitors glowed pale blue in the dark. I watched the wave crest and reverse, pulsing back across the site. Then I saw movement on camera 6, the feed covering the substation gate. A figure stood just outside the fence holding a flashlight. Even on the grainy black and white feed, I could tell it was a man in work coveralls. He waved the flashlight back and forth slowly, like he was trying to signal someone. The corporate rules were clear. If you see a person inside the fence line after hours, challenge them verbally and assess intent. Doyle's rules said if you see a person inside the fence line after midnight, do not challenge them. If they stop moving, you already lost. It was 9:52 p.m., not midnight yet, and the figure was outside the fence, not inside. I hesitated. Then I keyed the radio. Unit 1 to unknown individual at substation gate. Identify yourself. Static, then faintly my own voice. Don't. I released the key. The YI figure on camera stopped waving. Froze mid-gesture, arm extended, flashlight beam fixed in place like a spotlight. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then the figure resumed motion, but wrong. Its elbow bent backward, joint reversing, arm folding at an angle that made my stomach lurch. The flashlight beam stretched, became solid, a rigid line of light that didn't diffuse or scatter. It looked like a rod, a spear, something that could puncture. The figure turned toward the camera, toward the ops building. I stepped away from the monitors. My hand found the door handle. Some stupid primal part of me wanted to go outside, to see it with my own eyes, to confirm it was real. The door rattled, not from wind, from something testing the lock. I froze. The CCTV feed showed the porch empty, but the door handle turned slowly, metal grinding against metal. Caleb, Doyle's voice, outside. Caleb, open the door. It's still early. I forgot something. I looked at the monitors. Doyle's truck was gone. He'd left at 7 p.m. This wasn't him. Caleb, I need you to let me in, now. The voice was perfect. Same cadence, same gravel rough tone, but underneath it, barely audible, I heard something else. A hum, like the turbines, like the substation, like the sound your teeth make when metal vibrations pass through bone. The handle stopped turning. Footsteps moved away from the door, slow and deliberate. They circled the building. I tracked them on the monitors, but the cameras showed nothing. Just empty gravel, just my truck parked in the lot. Then the footsteps stopped. A knock, 1 knock per second, 20 times, 30, 50. I pulled Doyle's rules from my pocket. Number 2, if the red beacons blink in a wave pattern, west to east, stay in the ops building until dawn. Do not look out the windows. I wasn't looking. I was following the rules exactly. The knocking stopped. Silence. Then from the radio on the desk, Caleb, this is Mara. I'm at Turbine 12. Something's wrong with the nacelle. I need help. I grabbed the radio. Which Mara? Static, then. What? Tseng or Voss? A pause. Longer than it should have been. Tseng. I'm Tseng. Jesus, Caleb, what kind of question? I released the key. Doyle's updated rules said, if Mara Tseng asks you to follow her, say no. But the voice on the radio sounded afraid. It sounded real. Caleb, please. The nacelle door is open and there's something inside. I can hear it moving. I don't want to be out here alone. I looked at the monitor for Turbine 12. Mara's van was parked at the base. The tower door was open. A flashlight beam swept the interior. If she was lying, she was doing it well. If she was telling the truth, I was leaving her out there with something I didn't understand. I checked the timestamp. 10:03 p.m. Still not midnight. I grabbed the truck keys. Mercer, don't. I spun around. The radio was off. The voice had come from inside the building, from the hallway leading to the bathroom. I turned on the flashlight on my phone and aimed it down the hall. Empty. But at the far end, the bathroom door was cracked open. I hadn't left it that way. "Stay inside," the voice continued. Doyle's voice, but not from outside this time, from the bathroom. "If you leave now, you'll make it worse. You'll confirm it." "Confirm what?" "That you're the one who doesn't follow rules." I walked toward the bathroom. My hand shook. The flashlight beam jerked across the walls. I reached the door and pushed it open. Doyle sat on the closed toilet lid, hands folded in his lap. He looked exactly like he had that morning. Same jacket, same thermos on the floor beside him. But his eyes were wrong. Too wide, too still. "You're not real," I said. "Neither are you," he replied. "Not the version that stays inside. That version survives. The version that goes outside to help Mara Tseng dies at 10:47 p.m. when the nacelle door closes on his neck." My throat tightened. "How do you know?" "Because I've watched it happen. 14 times. 14 guards who thought they were doing the right thing. You're number 15. He tilted his head. "But you don't have to be. You can stay inside. Follow the rules. Let her die instead." I backed out of the bathroom and slammed the door. My heart was jackhammering. I went to the monitors. Mara was still at turbine 12, flashlight moving inside the tower. The radio crackled. "Caleb, it's coming down the ladder, please." I made a choice. I unlocked the door and ran to the truck. The drive to turbine 12 took 3 minutes. The headlights carved through the dark, illuminating the white tower rising ahead. Mara's van was parked sideways. Driver's door open, interior light on. The tower access door gaped wide. I parked and grabbed a flashlight from the glove box. "Mara," no answer. I approached the tower. The ladder inside led up into darkness. I could hear the hum of the turbine above, a deep vibration that made my ribs ache. "Mara, I'm here!" A sound from above, metal scraping metal. I started climbing. The ladder rungs were cold and slick. 20 feet, 40, 60. The hum grew louder, more invasive, until it felt like it was coming from inside my skull. At the top, the nacelle door was open. I pulled myself onto the platform and shone the flashlight inside. Empty. No Mara, no tools, no sign anyone had been there. But on the far wall, written in something dark and wet, "You chose wrong." The nacelle door slammed shut behind me. I spun around and grabbed the handle. Locked. I pounded on the metal. "Hey! Hey!" The turbine blade above me began to rotate, faster than it should. The centrifugal force pulled at my balance. The hum became a scream. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out. A text from an unknown number. "You followed the corporate rules. Challenge and assist. Now you're in the version where that gets you killed. The door will open at 10:47. Your neck will be in the way." I checked the time. 10:46 p.m. I looked around frantically. No emergency release. No secondary exit. Just smooth metal walls and the spinning mass of machinery above me. 10:47 p.m. The door clicked. I threw myself backward as it swung open, missing my throat by inches. I tumbled onto the platform, scrambled down the ladder, and ran to the truck. My hands shook so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. I drove back to the ops building. The red wave was still pulsing, west to east, east to west. When I got inside, Doyle was sitting at the desk. The real Doyle, or a version of him. He looked at me and sighed. "You went." "Yeah." "She wasn't there, was she?" "No." He nodded slowly. "Because Mara Tseng doesn't exist on nights when the red wave starts before 10. Only Mara Voss does. And Voss doesn't ask for help. She offers it." He stood. "You got lucky. Most people don't walk away from that choice." "What the hell is this place, Doyle?" He looked at me for a long time. Then he pulled a key from his pocket and unlocked a filing cabinet I hadn't noticed before. Inside was a stack of incident reports, dozens of them, each signed by a different guard. Different names, different dates. All of them ended the same way. Fatality, nacelle incident, door malfunction. This site is a test, Doyle said quietly. Not for power, for overlap. Two timelines trying to happen at once. The rules are how you navigate between them. But sometimes there's no right answer. Sometimes one version of you dies so another can live. He handed me a report. The name at the top was mine. Caleb Mercer. Fatality. 10:47 p.m. Nacelle incident. This is the version where you went, Doyle said. You're reading it from the version where you came, back. I stared at the paper. My signature was at the bottom, my handwriting. But I didn't remember signing it. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the motel room with every light on, staring at the incident report Doyle had given me. My name, my signature, a death that happened and didn't happen, depending on which version of the night I was remembering. The next evening, I arrived at the site early. Doyle was already there, sitting in the ops building with the lights dimmed. He looked older than he had the day before, more worn, like the timeline strain was something you could see in a person's face if you knew what to look for. You came back, he said. I need answers. No, you need to survive. Answers get people killed. Then I'll settle for directions. I pulled out the map of the site that had come with the corporate packet. The mile markers on the service road don't match this map. I checked the GPS. The road is longer than it should be. Doyle looked at the map, then at me. You noticed? Yeah. At marker 7, the road splits. Two identical roads, both look right, but the radios work differently depending on which one I take. What do you hear? On the left, static that sounds like chanting. On the right, my own voice reading rules I haven't learned yet. I set the map on the desk. I think the road is the seam, the place where the two versions touch. Doyle was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. Marker 7, yeah, that's where it started. Where what started? The overlap. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the turbine rows. 3 years ago, they built the substation. The engineers said the land was perfect, flat, empty, no obstructions, but it wasn't empty. There was an old grid underneath, decommissioned in the 80s, buried and forgotten. When they dug the foundation, they found cables still carrying voltage, active, current in a system that was supposed to be dead for 40 years. He turned back to me. They built anyway, tied the old grid into the new one, and that's when things started splitting. Two systems occupying the same space, both trying to deliver power, both refusing to die. The turbines started acting strange. The cameras showed things that weren't there. Guards started seeing themselves. And no one shut it down? They tried, twice. Both times the crew that came to decommission the substation disappeared. Not dead, just gone. No bodies, no evidence, just empty trucks and unsigned logs. He sat back down. So corporate changed the approach. They started hiring night guards who wouldn't ask questions, people with bad past, people who needed money more than they needed safety. People like me? Yeah, I felt cold. You knew. When I applied, you knew what I was. I knew you lied on the application. I knew you were running from something. That's the profile. That's who survives here. People who are already used to living in two realities, the official version and the true one. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to walk out. But instead, I asked, what's at marker 7? The split point. The place where the old grid surfaces. If you follow the right road, you reach the trailer cluster. If you follow the left road, you reach the same cluster, but it's occupied. Occupied by what? By the people who stayed. The shift started at 7 p.m. I did the first patrol at 8 while taking the service road past markers 1 through 6 without incident. At marker 7, the road split exactly as I remembered, two paths diverging into identical loops. I stopped the truck and got out. The wind had died completely. The turbines turned in silence. The red beacons hadn't started their wave yet, but the air felt pressurized, like the sky was holding its breath. I took the right road. The gravel crunched under the tires. The radio hissed static, then resolved into my own voice. Turn back. This road leads to the version of you that remembers. I kept driving. The trailer cluster came into view. 4 units arranged in a loose square, windows dark, doors hanging open. I parked and approached the nearest trailer. The door creaked as I pulled it wider. Inside was a break room setup, a card table, folding chairs, a mini fridge in the corner. The fridge was humming. I opened it. Inside was a 6-pack of beer, 2 sandwiches in plastic wrap, and a carton of orange juice. All fresh. The expiration date on the juice was 3 days away. But the power line to the trailer was cut. I'd seen it on the first patrol. The line hung limp, severed, connected to nothing. I checked the other trailers. Same story. Furniture, personal items, a jacket on a hook, a coffee mug on a counter. Someone had been living here, recently. In the last trailer, I found a cardboard box shoved under a cot. I pulled it out and opened it. Inside were personal effects, a worn wallet, a pair of work gloves, a faded photograph of a young boy standing in front of turbines. The boy was me. I knew the picture. I'd seen it before in a shoebox in my mother's closet. I was 8 years old. It was a school field trip to a wind farm 2 counties over. I remembered the bus ride. I remembered the tour guide. But these turbines hadn't existed when I was 8. The High Wind Plains wind farm was built 3 years ago. I turned the photo over. On the back, in my mother's handwriting, Caleb's field trip, April 1998. High Wind Plains, impossible. I heard gravel crunch outside. I shoved the photo into my pocket and stepped out of the trailer. A figure stood in the center of the cluster. A man in coveralls, face shadowed by the brim of a cap. He didn't move, didn't speak. I reached for the flashlight on my belt. The figure raised one hand in a slow wave, the gesture familiar and wrong, like something rehearsed too many times. "Who are you?" I called. The figure tilted its head. Then it spoke in my voice. "You don't remember, but you were here before. Before the turbines, before the grid. You were here when it was just wind and grass and something underneath that listened." I backed toward the truck. The figure followed, matching my pace exactly. Same stride, same rhythm. "You opened it, Caleb, when you were 8. You and the other kids on the field trip. You climbed the fence at the old substation and touched the cables. You felt the current. You let it in." I got into the truck and locked the doors. The figure stood in the headlights, arms at its sides. "You brought it back," it said. "When you lied on the application, when you came here running from what you did, you fed it. And now it's waking up." I reversed hard, turned the truck around and drove back to marker 7. This time, I took the left road. The radio crackled, static that resolved into chanting. Low, rhythmic words I didn't recognize. I followed the left road to the trailer cluster. It was the same cluster, but the lights were on. Through the windows, I could see figures moving. Shadows that walked with human proportions, but no human weight. I didn't stop. I drove back to the ops building and ran inside. Doyle was gone. The desk was empty. The monitors showed normal feeds. Turbines turning, road empty, no anomalies. On the desk was a handwritten note. "Caleb, if you took the right road, you know the truth now. If you took the left, you saw what's waiting. Both are real. Both are you. The substation is the source. The fence corner where the hum becomes a voice. That's where you opened it. That's where you can close it, but closing it means choosing which version stays and which version gets erased. Doyle. I looked at the CCTV monitor showing the substation. The fence corner was visible in the frame, the chain link, illuminated by a floodlight. As I watched, the light flickered, went dark, came back on. In the moment of darkness, someone had been standing at the fence. When the light returned, they were gone. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You can't close it. You can only decide who gets to remember. I checked the time, 11:47 p.m. The red wave started at 11:48. The wave began at the western edge and rolled toward me like a slow detonation. One beacon, then the next, each turbine igniting in perfect sequence. I watched it sweep across the site, feeling the air grow dense, the pressure building behind my eyes. I was still holding the photograph. The boy in the picture looked so certain, so unafraid. I didn't remember being that way, but I didn't remember the field trip either. Not really, just a sense of empty time, a gap in my childhood that no one had ever questioned. The radio crackled. Caleb. Not static, not my voice. This was Mara, but I didn't know which one. Caleb, I'm at the substation. You need to see this. I checked the CCTV feed. A figure stood at the fence corner, waving a flashlight. The beam swept in slow arcs, signaling. I couldn't make out the face. Which Mara? I asked into the radio. Does it matter? Doyle said, Doyle's been lying to you, or he's been telling the truth. Depends on which set of rules you think is real. Her voice was calm, measured. Come to the substation. I'll show you how it works, how the overlap happens, how to stop it. I looked at Doyle's note on the desk. Closing it means choosing which version stays. What happens if I don't come? I asked. Then the wave keeps rolling. Tonight, tomorrow night, every night until the site tears itself apart, or until you do. A pause. You've felt it, haven't you? The splitting. The way you're starting to see yourself in places you haven't been yet. That's the overlap, spreading. It's not just the site anymore, it's you. I checked the monitor again. The figure at the fence was still there, still waving. I grabbed the keys and left. The drive to the substation took 2 minutes. The red wave pulsed overhead, casting everything in strobing crimson light. The turbines hummed, but the sound was changing, less mechanical, more organic, like breathing. Mara stood at the fence corner, hands in the pockets of her work vest. She smiled as I parked. You came. Which one are you? Voss, she gestured to the fence. The version that wants you to survive. Tseng would have told you to go inside the substation. That's where the bad choice is. And what's the good choice? She stepped closer. There isn't one. That's the point. The site doesn't work on good and bad. It works on selection. 2 timelines, 2 versions of events. You pick one, the other collapses. You get to exist in the one you chose. Everything else, everyone else gets erased. I felt my stomach drop. What do you mean erased? Doyle, the guards before you, the version of yourself that didn't take this job. All the people and moments that only exist in the discarded timeline. They stop happening. Not dead, just unhappened. She tilted her head. That's what you felt when you saw yourself on camera. That's what the red wave is showing you. 2 Calebs, both real, both trying to finish the shift. Only one gets to remember doing it. I looked at the substation. Through the fence, I could see the transformers, the breaker boxes, the tangle of cables snaking into the ground. The hum was louder here, resonant, almost lyrical. What did I do when I was 8? I asked. Mara's smile faded. You and 6 other kids climbed the fence during the field trip. This was before the wind farm, just the old substation, abandoned. The guide wasn't paying attention. You touched the cables. They were live. They were awake. She gestured to the ground. The old grid isn't just electrical infrastructure, it's a network, a web. It was built on top of something older, something that learned how to mimic current, how to flow through wires and transformers and breakers. When you touched it, it learned you, your pattern, your frequency. And now it's calling you back, because you're the one who opened the door, and it thinks you're the one who's supposed to close it. I felt lightheaded. The red wave pulsed, west to east, east to west. How do I close it? Mara handed me a piece of paper, folded, worn, covered in handwriting I didn't recognize. New rules, not Doyle's, not corporates. These are the real ones, the ones the site has been trying to show you. I unfolded the paper. Rules for closing the overlap. 1. Enter the substation at exactly 12 a.m. 2. Find the breaker labeled primary. Do not touch any other. Switch. 3. Flip the breaker off. Count to 10. Flip it back on. 4. When the hum stops, say your name aloud. Say it clearly. That's how the grid knows which version to keep. 5. Leave immediately. Do not look at the monitors. Do not check the cameras. Do not try to verify what happened. Trust that the version you chose is the one that stays. 6. If you hear someone else say your name before you do, leave the substation and drive away. You're in the wrong timeline. I read it twice. What happens if I don't do this? The overlap continues. It spreads. More guards, more nights, more versions of you that don't remember who they are. Mara's voice softened. Caleb, you're already splitting. You've seen yourself. You've heard yourself. How long do you think you can hold both versions in your head before one of them stops being you? I looked at the substation. The fence was locked. But I had the master key on the ring Doyle had given me. Why are you helping me? I asked. Mara's smile returned, but it was sad. Because in one version of tonight, you helped me. You came to Turbine 12 even though the rules said not to. You risked the nacelle door. You made the wrong choice and survived anyway. She stepped back. I'm returning the favor. In this version, I'm the one who helps you. I checked my phone. 11:54 p.m. Go, Mara said. You have 6 minutes. I unlocked the fence and stepped inside the substation. The hum surrounded me, vibrated through my chest. The transformers loomed like tombstones. The cables snaked underfoot, half buried in gravel. I found the breaker box. It was old, rusted, covered in warning labels that had faded to illegibility. I opened it. Inside were 24 switches, unmarked except for one at the top. Primary. 11:58 p.m. I heard footsteps behind me. I turned. A figure stood at the fence. Same coveralls, same posture. It was me. The other Caleb stared at me, expressionless. Then it spoke. If you flip that switch, I stop existing. I'm the version that stayed inside, the version that followed Doyle's rules, the version that survives by hiding. I didn't move. You're the version that takes risks, it continued. The version that breaks jaws and lies on applications and drives toward danger instead of away. You think that makes you the real one, but it doesn't. We're both real, and you're about to erase me. 11:59 p.m. I looked at the breaker, at the other Caleb, at the red wave pulsing overhead. I'm sorry, I said. I flipped the switch. The hum stopped. Total silence. The turbines froze mid-rotation. The red beacons went dark. The world held its breath. I counted to 10. I flipped the switch back on. The hum returned, but different. Lower, smoother, like a system resetting to factory defaults. The turbines resumed turning. The beacons ignited in their normal staggered rhythm. I opened my mouth to say my name, but someone else said it first. Caleb Mercer. The voice came from behind me. I turned. The other Caleb was gone. In its place stood Doyle holding a flashlight. You flipped it, he said. I couldn't speak. You closed the overlap, Doyle continued. The version of the site that splits is gone. The turbines will run normal now. The cameras will show what's real. The rules won't contradict. He stepped closer. But you didn't say your name first, I did. My chest tightened. What does that mean? Doyle's face was unreadable. It means the grid chose me. I'm the version that stays. I'm the version that gets to remember. He looked at me with something close to pity. You're the version that closes the door and walks away. You won't remember this. You won't remember the overlap. You'll finish the shift, clock out, and think tonight was normal. That's not... It's already happening. He pointed at my hand. I looked down. I was holding a clipboard, an incident report, my signature at the bottom, neat and complete. I didn't remember signing it. Doyle turned and walked toward the fence. Go back to the ops building, finish your shift. Tomorrow you'll wake up and this will feel like a dream. He left. I stood in the substation, the hum resonating through my ribs, and tried to hold on to what had just happened. But the details were already slipping. The photograph in my pocket felt lighter. The rules in my hand looked unfamiliar. I drove back to the ops building. The monitors showed clean feeds. The turbines turned in steady rhythm. The red wave didn't come. At 7 a.m. the sun rose. Doyle arrived and took over the desk. He nodded at me like it was any other morning. Quiet night? He asked. Yeah, I said. And I believed it. 3 nights later, I started finding the inconsistencies. Small things at first. The coffee in the break room was a brand I didn't remember buying. The log entries were in my handwriting, but I didn't remember writing them. The truck had a scratch on the passenger door that I couldn't account for. Then I found the notebook. I'd left it in the desk drawer after the first night. When I opened the drawer on the 4th night, the notebook was full. Pages and pages of entries in my handwriting describing events I didn't remember. Patrols I hadn't done. Conversations I hadn't had. Rules I'd never read. One entry dated the night I flipped the breaker, 12:03 a.m. substation. Doyle said my name before I could. I felt something shift, like a gear clicking into place. The version of me that remembers the overlap is fading. The version that doesn't is taking over. I'm writing this while I still can. While I still know this happened. If you're reading this, you're the version that stayed, the version that doesn't remember. And I need you to know, you're not the real one. You're the copy. I set the notebook down. My hands were shaking. That night at 9:47 p.m. I did a patrol. At mile marker 7 I stopped the truck. The road didn't split. It was just one road, straight and normal. But when I got out and walked to the edge, I could see gravel marks where a second path used to be. Tire tracks that started and stopped mid-air like something had been erased poorly. I drove to the trailer cluster. The doors were closed. The windows were dark. When I tried the handle on the first trailer, it was locked. I looked through the window. Empty. No furniture, no fridge, just bare walls and a concrete floor. But I remembered the fridge humming. I remembered the beer and the sandwiches. Or did I? At 11 p.m. I went to the substation. The fence was locked. The hum was normal, steady, mechanical, nothing lyrical. I stood at the corner where Mara had stood and tried to remember what she'd said. I couldn't. I knew her name. I knew she'd been important, but details were gone, smoothed over like water erasing footprints in sand. I went back to the ops building. The CCTV monitors showed normal feeds. I sat at the desk and stared at them, trying to find a crack, a glitch, anything that proved the overlap had been real. Then I saw it. Camera 4 covering the south turbine row. For just a frame, a single frame in the playback, there was a figure standing at the base of turbine 18. Coveralls. Cap. Arms at its sides. It looked like me. I rewound the feed. The frame was gone. Just empty gravel and turbine shadow, but I'd seen it. At 11:47 p.m., the red beacons started blinking in sequence, west to east. A wave. I grabbed Doyle's rules from the drawer, but when I unfolded the paper, it was blank. Just a piece of notebook paper with no writing. I checked the corporate packet. The rules were there, clean and professional. If the red beacons blink in sequence, report the malfunction and continue patrol. I didn't remember that, being the rule. But I didn't remember what the other rule was either. I stayed inside. Some instinct I couldn't name told me that was right. The wave rolled across the site, once, twice, 3 times. Then it stopped. At midnight, the radio crackled. Caleb. My own voice. Caleb, you need to go to the substation. I'm waiting for you. I grabbed the radio. Who is this? You know who this is. I'm the version of you that said my name first, the version that remembers. I've been trying to reach you for 3 nights, but the overlap won't let me through. You need to come to the substation. Now. I looked at the monitors. Camera 6 showed the substation. A figure stood at the fence, waving. Why? I asked. Because you're not real, Caleb. You're the version the grid created to replace me. You don't have memories of the overlap because you weren't there. You were made after it closed, a copy, a placeholder. My chest felt hollow. That's not true. Check your phone, look at your messages, look at your call history. I pulled out my phone. The call log was empty. No outgoing calls, no incoming, just a blank screen. I checked my messages, one text from an unknown number sent 3 days ago. You're not him, but you think you are. That's how the grid works. It fills the gap with something that feels right. And you feel right, don't you? You feel real. I dropped the phone. Come to the substation, the voice on the radio said. I'll prove it. I'll show you the seam where you were stitched in. I stood. I left the building. I drove to the substation. The figure was waiting at the fence. As I got closer, I could see his face. My face. Same scar on the chin from a childhood fall. Same crooked front tooth. Same tired eyes. He smiled. You came. What do you want? I want you to understand. He gestured to the substation. When I flipped the breaker, the grid had to choose. It chose the version of me that Doyle named. The version that remembers. But it couldn't erase you completely. You'd already started existing. You'd already lived 3 nights. So it did the next best thing. It let you keep going. It let you become real by forgetting you weren't. I felt dizzy. I have memories. I remember the lawsuit, the bar fight, the drive here. Those are my memories. The grid copied them. Gave them to you so you'd have a past. He stepped closer to the fence. But you don't have a future. You're a loop. You'll work this shift forever, following the corporate rules, never questioning, never remembering, and I'll keep trying to break through. Keep trying to show you. Why? Because you're me. And I can't let a version of myself live like that. He pulled something from his pocket. A key. The master key to the substation fence. Take it, he said. Go inside. Flip the breaker again. This time, say your name first. Erase me. Become the version that stays. I stared at the key. What happens to you? I stop existing, but at least I'll stop remembering. His smile was bitter. You don't know what it's like, holding 2 timelines in your head, knowing the world reset and you're the only one who noticed. It's like drowning in a memory no one else believes. I took the key. I unlocked the fence and stepped inside. The hum was louder now, insistent, almost eager. I found the breaker box, opened it. The primary switch stared back at me. The other Caleb stood outside the fence, watching. Do it, he said. End this. I flipped the switch. The hum stopped. Silence. The world held still. I counted to 10. I flipped it back on. The hum returned. I opened my mouth. Caleb. Caleb Mercer. The voice came from behind me. I turned. Doyle stood in the substation holding a flashlight. Again. You flipped it again, he said. I couldn't breathe. You tried to take control, tried to make yourself the real one. Doyle shook his head. But the grid doesn't care who flips the switch. It cares who speaks first, and I was here, waiting, just like last time. I looked at the fence. The other Caleb was gone. Where did he go? I asked. He was never there. That was the grid showing you what you're trying to become, the version that remembers, but you can't be that version, Caleb, because I already am. I backed away. You're not Caleb. No, Doyle said. I'm the guard who was here before you, the one who figured it out, the one who learned that if you say the name first, you get to stay. You get to be real. He stepped closer. I've been doing this for 3 years. Every time a new guard comes, I wait. I let them find the rules, let them flip the switch, and then I say their name and take their place. You're not the first Caleb Mercer. You're the fourth. He smiled. The grid makes copies, I collect them, and every time the new one thinks they're the original. I ran, out of the substation, into the truck, down the service road. I didn't stop until I reached the ops building. Inside, the monitors showed normal feeds. The turbines turned. The red wave had stopped. I checked the notebook. The last entry was in my handwriting. I flipped the switch again. Doyle said my name. I don't know how many times I've done this. I don't know which version I am anymore. All I know is the shift never ends. I looked at the CCTV monitor showing the interior of the ops building. I was sitting at the desk, writing in the notebook. But I was standing across the room. The me at the desk looked up. It smiled. And I realized I was the one on camera. Dawn came at 7:06 a.m. The sun broke over the horizon in a clean line of gold, and the turbines turned steady and true. The red beacons extinguished. The hum from the substation settled into its normal mechanical rhythm. Everything looked exactly as it should. I sat at the desk, staring at the logbook. It was filled out completely. Every patrol logged, every timestamp accurate. My signature at the bottom of each page, neat and confident. I didn't remember writing any of it. Doyle's truck pulled into the lot at 7:15. I heard the door slam, heard his boots on the gravel, heard the front door open. He walked in carrying his thermos and newspaper like this was the most ordinary morning in the world. He looked at me. Quiet night? Yeah, I said. He poured himself coffee and sat down at the desk. He scanned the logbook, nodded, and signed his name as day shift supervisor. Then he looked at me again, and for just a moment I saw something in his face. Recognition, maybe, or familiarity. Like he'd had this exact conversation 100 times before. You did good work, he said. Clean logs, no incidents, corporate will be happy. Thanks. He opened the newspaper. I stood to leave. Mercer, he said without looking up. You planning to come back tonight? I paused at the door. That's the job, right? Yeah. He turned a page, just checking. I left. The drive back to the motel took 40 minutes. The high plains stretched flat and golden under the morning sun. I passed a gas station, a roadside diner, a billboard advertising farm equipment. Everything was normal, real, solid. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was driving through a memory someone else had lived. At the motel, I lay down on the bed and closed my eyes. I tried to remember the first night, the handwritten rules, the figure at the substation, the nacelle door, Mara. The details felt distant, blurred, like I was trying to recall a dream from years ago instead of days. I pulled out my phone. The call log was still empty. No messages except the one from the unknown number. You're not him, but you think you are. I deleted it. That evening I drove back to the site. The sun was setting. The turbine stood white and clean against the darkening sky. Doyle was waiting in the ops building. He handed me the logbook and the keys without a word. I sat down at the desk. He left. At 8:01 p.m., I did the first patrol. The service road was smooth and straight. No split at mile marker 7. The trailer cluster was locked and empty. The substation hummed at the correct frequency. At 9:47 p.m., the red beacons blinked in their normal staggered rhythm. No wave, no sequence. At midnight, the radio stayed silent. Everything was fine. At 3:00 a.m., I checked the CCTV playback. I scrubbed through the feeds looking for anomalies. Nothing. Just empty turbine rows and gravel roads. Then I checked camera 4. I rewound to 11:00 p.m. The frame I'd seen before, the figure at turbine 18, was gone. Completely. Like it had never existed, but I remembered it. At 5:00 a.m., I opened the desk drawer and pulled out the notebook. I flipped to the last entry. I flipped the switch again. Doyle said my name. I don't know how many times I've done this. I don't know which version I am anymore. All I know is the shift never ends. I stared at the words. They were in my handwriting. I was sure of that, but I didn't remember writing them. I turned to a blank page. I picked up a pen. I wrote, "If you're reading this, you're not the first. You're not even the second. You're a version of a version, and the shift never ends." I set the pen down. I waited. Nothing happened. Then I noticed the page was different. The words I'd just written were fading, the ink lightening, bleeding into the paper like water erasing pencil marks. Within seconds, the page was blank again. I tried again, wrote the same sentence, watched it fade. The notebook wouldn't let me leave a message. It wouldn't let me warn the next version because the next version was already me. At 6:50 a.m., Doyle arrived. He walked in, poured coffee, sat down. He scanned the logbook and nodded. "Quiet night?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, and I believed it. I left. I drove back to the motel. I slept. At 6:00 p.m., I drove back to the site. The loop continued. 7 nights, 14, 21. Every morning, Doyle asked the same question. Every morning, I gave the same answer. Every night, I followed the corporate rules. I did the patrols, I logged the data, I watched the monitors. And every night, just before dawn, I felt a moment of dissonance, a brief flicker where the details didn't quite line up, where the logs looked unfamiliar, or the truck had a scratch I couldn't explain, or the turbines seemed to hum in a frequency that made my chest ache. But the feeling always passed. On the 32nd night, I found the memo. It was sitting in the printer tray when I arrived. Fresh paper, crisp folds, no date, no signature. Just 2 messages. "Welcome, Caleb. Please review the updated rules for tonight." And below it, handwritten in different ink, "Don't trust the version of you that feels relieved." I read it 3 times. Then I set it on the desk and started the shift. At 9:47 p.m., the red beacons began blinking in sequence, west to east. A wave. I grabbed the corporate rules. They said, "Report the malfunction and continue patrol." I grabbed Doyle's handwritten rules from the drawer. The paper was blank. I sat in the dark and watched the wave roll across the site. Once, twice, 10 times. At midnight, the radio crackled. "Caleb," my own voice. "Caleb, you need to flip the switch again. You're in a loop. You've been in it for 32 nights. I'm trying to break you out." I stared at the radio. "How do I know you're real?" "You don't. But you know something's wrong. You've felt it. You've seen it. The logbook you don't remember. The messages you can't keep. The version of yourself that keeps showing up in places you haven't been." I looked at the CCTV monitor. Camera 4 showed turbine 18. A figure stood at the base. Coveralls. Cap. It waved. "Go to the substation," the voice said. Flip the switch. Say your name first. End the loop. I looked at the memo. Don't trust the version of you that feels relieved. I felt relieved. The voice on the radio was offering me an escape, a way out, a chance to become real. But I remembered something Doyle had said back on a night I couldn't quite recall. The grid doesn't care who flips the switch. It cares who speaks first. If I went to the substation, someone would say my name before I could. Doyle. Or the other me. Or the grid itself. And I'd reset again. The loop would continue. I turned off the radio. I stayed in the ops building. I watched the red wave pulse until dawn. At 7:15 a.m., Doyle arrived. Quiet night? He asked. I looked at him, really looked. His face was tired. His eyes were distant. He looked like a man who'd been asking the same question for a very long time. No, I said. He paused. What happened? I don't know, but I think you do. He set down his thermos. For a long time, he didn't speak. Then he pulled a key from his pocket and unlocked the filing cabinet. He pulled out a folder and handed it to me. Inside were incident reports, dozens of them, all signed by different guards, all ending the same way. Fatality, timeline collapse, subject unable to stabilize, and at the bottom of the stack, a report with my name. Caleb Mercer, incident date ongoing, status loop active, resolution pending. You're stuck, Doyle said quietly. You've been stuck since the first night. The version of you that flipped the switch didn't disappear. It fractured, split into multiple iterations. Every night, a new version wakes up thinking it's the first. And every night, it tries to figure out what's wrong. How do I stop it? You don't. He took the folder back. The loop is the resolution. The grid couldn't choose which version of you to keep, so it kept all of them. You're living every possible outcome simultaneously. The version that stays inside, the version that goes outside, the version that flips the switch, the version that doesn't. All of them are you. All of them are real. I felt cold. So I'm trapped. No, Doyle said, you're stable. The loop is how you survive. As long as you keep repeating the shift, the grid doesn't have to choose. You get to keep existing. All of you. He stood and walked to the door. Go home, Mercer. Sleep. Come back tonight. And the night after. And the night after that. It's not a perfect life, but it's the only one you have. He left. I sat in the ops building staring at the monitors. The turbines turned. The sun rose. Everything was normal. Except I knew it wasn't. I knew I'd have this same conversation again tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. I knew the red wave would come, the radio would crackle, the figure would wave at turbine 18. I knew I'd find the memo again, and the notebook, and the photograph. I knew I'd drive to the substation and flip the switch, or stay inside and watch it happen on camera, or leave the site entirely and wake up the next evening with no memory of driving away. All of those outcomes were happening. Right now, in parallel. I was living all of them, and I couldn't tell which one was real. I checked the logbook. My signature stared back at me, neat and confident. I didn't remember signing. I checked my phone. No messages, no calls. I checked the CCTV feed. Camera 4 showed turbine 18, empty. No figure. But I knew if I rewound the footage, I'd find a single frame, a glimpse of myself standing where I shouldn't be. I closed the logbook. I stood. I walked to the door. Before I left, I looked back at the desk, at the monitors. At the ops building, I'd spent 32 nights inside, or 3 nights, or 1, depending on which version of the timeline I was remembering. The memo was still sitting in the printer tray. Don't trust the version of you that feels relieved. I felt relieved. I left anyway. And tonight, whichever tonight this is, I'll come back. Because the shift never ends, and neither do I.